Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the Brightworks. I like to do this every once in a while where I take a look at one of my own games and commentate, critique, and otherwise judge my own gameplay to make sure that I'm staying fair, unbiased, and valid in my own criticisms. So today, we are going to be taking a look at a match that I played on, I'm forgetting the map of this one, Sunderance V1.3 over there in the bottom left-hand corner. Our blue team leader is going to be Pol Agzor, coming in at 28 true skills. Plenty of chevrons right here. Very experienced player is what that tells me. Going to be representing the blue team as an Armada commander on the front. Well, yeah, the front line of Sunderance here. I'm trying to double check here. Yeah, Sunderance version 1.3. It's an interesting one. There's a lot of interesting spots where you have to spawn, and they're not exactly highlighted for you. There's also, I'm gonna clear the map there, 1 second. There's also a very valuable 5.0 metal extractor right here, but you might notice that all of the other metal extractor points are relatively low. We have, 0.8s, 0.9s, 1.0s, very, very minimal metal extractor points. So holding more space on this map is very, very important, and holding as many metal extractors as possible is very important to maintaining a healthy economy. I'm going to be the red team leader right here. However, I'm not the... Oh, well, that's interesting. Never mind. I don't know what I'm talking about. I guess I am the red team leader. 31 true skill. And I'm just barely getting my silver chevron here, which is quite nice. Now, I had an interesting plan here. We didn't really want to go for any tech in the backline, and I didn't really feel like teching in the backline. We decided that Kurdian wanted to play air, so Kurdian decided to go into that Cortex air, which is all well and good because you get those shurikens, of course. And I decided what I was going to do was try and make Armada T1 bots and use the geothermal here instead of for a tech advantage for a massive unit production advantage. So that's my plan going into this, and we'll have to check in on how that works here. Of course, when I'm playing the game, I don't have all the vision and everything to know whether that was a good idea or not. Deviloba, going to be the orange player here and spawning right in front of me, has a very important job, right? It has to make sure that no ticks or anything get leaked through this area. It's a very cheeky little area to sneak units right through, so it's important that he holds this one very nicely. And then, of course, also you have to contest this. You can see I was a little surprised to figure out that there was 5 metal per second coming in on that metal extractor right there. Very important to try and take control of as quickly as possible here. And I wouldn't have minded seeing a transport, actually. That's something that I'm thinking about now that I didn't think about in-game. But yeah, using a transport over there, this is something that I've already messed up on. My micro is all the way across the field. You can see I've got ticks running around all over the place trying to snipe things wherever I can. And already it's going to mean that I don't have these guys doing anything for a good hot second here. These should definitely be making their way over here, starting to work on the geothermals, or maybe going and working on some of these metal extractors. Either one would be a good idea, but right now my micro is definitely slipping. Need to get better at moving the ticks around, right, and microing them. You see I was busy microing this silver star hero over here. Finally gave it a nice long command so that I could look back at my base to get all of this up and running. It's a slippery slope, right? You start microing a little too hard, and eventually you find yourself with just nowhere near enough resources or enough, growth in the backline, right? You don't have your units growing and expanding as quickly as you need them to. This is one way I like to queue my ticks. Send them where metal extractors are supposed to be, and then just set a fight command so that they'll fight anything nearby. And you can see this guy's going to actually blow up some wind turbines. Might have even been able to chain react all these if I was paying a little bit better attention. Now, Devilova has essentially beelined for this metal extractor up here, which is really nice. That's quite a powerful build for making sure, quite a powerful decision rather, for just making sure that you have a stronghold over whatever income comes out of the center. And I say whatever because there are other maps where this is kind of prevalent as well. I think Rosetta Stone is the name of another map that's similarly designed. There's one extremely valuable metal extractor that you can take control of. I do like also that Deviloba has gone for vehicles here instead of bots, and despite the terrain, I think having vehicles is going to be well worth it, considering the fact that, of course, those vehicles are quite expensive in the metal department, but having the extra 5 metal per second is going to more than justify that cost. You can see I started up a geothermal and finished it up with my commander, and then I sent these constructors on over to try and build all of these metal extractors, getting these up and running as quickly as possible. At the very top of my to-do list, commander going to build a whole bunch of build power over here. I also pumped out another construction worker, and eventually thinking about getting some build power underway. Right now I'm leaking a whole lot of energy, and it's not a problem because there are people on my team who desperately need energy, but that's always something you have to be wary of, and so that's why you can see that I'm going for some of those energy converters over here. Plaguezor has gone for a Janus right off the bat here, and it's going to get a nice little connection on that Blitz tank right there. However, not going to get the kill. Light laser tower will finish the job though. Softens up that other one as well, and so this Janus is very, very important. Plagzor has to keep this Janus alive because it's essentially the only thing that can fire away at long enough range to do any damage here, and of course it does super high damage to the enemy commander. So I think what Plagzor is trying to do is sneak this thing close enough to the commander that it can fire and then back it off as quickly as possible. There we go, it will manage to connect at least one missile. Oh, commander does D-gun it though. Nicely done there by Deviloba, shutting that down, and honestly that is essentially shutting down all of the aggression here from the blue player. Does have another Janus out eventually, but for the time being that's going to relieve a little bit of the pressure. Excellent bombing runs over here, that's what I was commenting on. Nice bombing runs from our air player, getting a couple of bombers out and using them to target some of the wind production facilities over here. Oh, looks like Fusto Ra is going for wind turbines, but in a hugely compact pattern. You usually want to spread those out at least one click so that they don't chain react whenever they get bombed. Otherwise, well, you're going to lose your entire wind turbine to a T1 bomber, and that's never fun. Now, this is a cool little move. Crocs is going to send 2 of these grunts across the field here. Noticing that Plagzor's commander is pretty far forward, sending these Groks over towards the metal extractors, properly assessing that there's essentially no defenses over here. We have a bunch of constructors and a light laser tower, but that's essentially nothing to shut down or run by. And now these are going to start making their way across and shutting down metal extractors. It's really, really easy move, but it's so difficult to make in the heat of the action, right? And so it's really cool to see that decision being made right there by Crocs. Very nicely done. And it is going to shut down some of that production here for Krogzor. This grunt will eventually be shut down by a light laser tower. This grunt will make it all the way over here. There's nothing really guarding this geothermal over here, so you could see this grunt do a significant amount of damage. It's like 2 or 3% per shot, but it gets XP pretty quick. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Commanders are encroaching from both sides here. They desperately need to shut this grunt down. Wow, 42% damage. I mean, you can imagine if both grunts had targeted that, you would have been in a really good position right there. Probably would have been able to get the kill on both of those. Bombers do connect with another wind turbine field, but at this point, everyone has wind defense, or air defense up, rather. In this case, a chainsaw, which is a very expensive air defense, but it is quite good, and that's the reason why those bombers were shut down so quickly here. I tried to sneak some ticks through, and I'll explain exactly what my thought process was. Basically, my whole plan was to build up a force of ticks that was capable of sniping the enemy commanders, like Plagzor over here. Now, Plagzor was way too fortified up here. You can see I have all the ticks right here, and I'm thinking about building up some sort of a push. But he does have a lot of light laser towers, and with ticks you can't really push in with those light laser towers guarding you. Not to mention the Janus, of course, which would be able to do immense damage to a big cluster of ticks. So instead, I think I decide to, yeah, just send them on across, where I noticed that my allies are getting a great trade over here. Oh, those Januses did connect. Huge, though. Sending them across to basically try and do a little bit of damage, and so you can see me kind of balling them up. That's another thing that's important, is instead of right-clicking somewhere, spreading them out in any way possible. Gonna jump on top of an artillery piece because I notice it's exposed. See the light laser towers over here and decide that it's not worth pushing in there. Instead, just diving on the purple player's base, trying to, at the very least, do a little bit of damage with whatever ticks I have left over here. Getting some of the build power. It's decent, but I think splitting these up would have been the right way to do it. Kill some metal extractors for the trouble. Does allow for a lot of aggression over here by Emma Tarkus. Deviloba and Plagzor trading it out. Plagzor initiating and goes in for the self-D. Is going to detonate that commander, and those corpses are now going to be lying on the battlefield here. An interesting decision, because he doesn't really, Plagzor that is, doesn't really have any way to, any way to contest this. There's not really any units out on the field. His base was just shut down. At this point, I think sacrificing the commander is just more and more build power and more economy that you're essentially throwing away, right? I mean, the commander does give you a little bit of energy and a little bit of metal, and it's well worth remembering that. Losing the commander there, very expensive, and Croc's doing a great job of eating up that commander right now. I also started a bunch of res bots. I was actually thinking about resurrecting that commander, but he was already eating it, so I figured we might as well just use that metal for the team's benefit. And you can see now I send a big old run by of pawns through, trying desperately to push on this advantage that we've got right now. T2 is out on the field, and that's really scary, though. That was a indicator that the time was up, and so you can see their player, who was essentially in the same position as me, I guess technically this is the same position as me. Both of them, I suppose, went into T2 instead of going into air. And so what that means is that we are essentially way behind in the technology game. And so the aggression is really, really important. We have to get something done right now, otherwise we're never going to be able to beat the T2 scaling. Which is why you see we're starting to lose positions over here. The fiends, I almost called the flamers. The fiends here are going to burn through over on this side. I think that was the Nod unit. The what were those called? I think they were called the flamers, right? Anyway, the flamethrower units that Nod had, they were all beautiful. I just remember they looked really epic whenever they would fire. Anyways, the fiends are now ravaging our front lines. You can see Commander dies over here on this side. Shurikens are sent over in this direction to try and help out, and I think that's exactly the right decision here. A bunch of rocket bots, which is extremely prone to shuriken fire, right? We could paralyze those down immediately. Wow, rocket bots with the shuriken kill. Never thought I'd see the day. And at this point, all those res bots I had are now just going to eat up a whole bunch of material. And the reason for that is I think I'm thinking about T2 here. Starting to amp up T1 production. You can see I've gone for quite a lot of build power on just a T1 lab, pumping out a whole lot of pawns and trying to use those to brace every side of the map here. It's a tricky gambit, but you can see that I've got enough pawns here that I'm pretty confident I can kill this commander. Gotta micro my heart out here. He's doing excellently to surround with the Rocketeers. That's a great strategy to prevent some of that damage from falling on the commander. But just barely I was able, I mean, there was only 3 or so pawns left, so it's a very close call, but just barely able to kill that commander. And that's going to be even more metal lying on the floor here. Sending the resbots in, you'll notice I re-queue these resbots, hold spacebar and then right click in order to send those resbots on a different path so that they don't bunch up and go in here too soon, at least not before the units do. And these pawns are going to push back the Rocketeers here for Jeg00, before my hungry boys can go eat up all of that juicy metal. Building up these big waves of T1 is very risky though, right? Because I mean, these fiends are great for eating or for burning down that T1 unit. Sorry, I was looking at this resbot eating up this lab here. A little bit greedy, but oh, I guess the blue player is actually tapped out of the game already. Interesting. In that case, I guess all is well. We should probably see a take command so that we can use these constructors and this energy storage and all that other stuff that the blue player had. But other than that, the blue player being gone, I guess it's fine to eat up all their base then. We need to see these metal extractors retaken here. I think it might be confusing the blue team that we actually still see the blue constructors, but the player is completely gone. So we need to see somebody take that so at the very least the metal extractors can be reacquired here. Across the map, we also had a player that left. Our tan player right here. I think they disconnected. Can't remember entirely, but either way. Sinyard here is going to essentially be holding the front line. The entire front line, all the way across here, which is a very, very wide front line, and it's also a 2v1, so you have to be very careful. I mean, it's actually more than a 2v1, right? Because you have the support of the backline here as well. It's a pretty tricky one. And the way that I was trying to counteract that, or at the very least assist with that, is by sending these little run-by squads all over the place, trying to at the very least make it inconvenient to position units in any one spot or another. Just making sure that there was always some reason to keep the armies moving around. That way they weren't supporting either of our front lines, which were essentially still just T1 centers. You can see without me going up to T2, it essentially fell on my teammate right here, Crocs, to go up to T2, and did an excellent job at it. You can see almost done with the fusion reactor by now. That comes up and online. T2 extractor's online as well. I'm just barely getting my T2 constructor out, so that's a bit of a point of improvement for me. I probably should have looked to purchase a T2 constructor from Crocs here. I'm not sure exactly when Crocs' T2 lab even came up. He must have just pumped out that T2 constructor as well as a Twitcher or two to make those fiends, and then gone straight into that T2 economy with the T2 constructor. But either way, I probably should have purchased one of those instead of going for my own T2 lab. However, now that I have the T2 lab, my first inkling of a decision here is going to be going for sprinters. On wide open maps like this, the sprinter are an excellent option because they're super high damage, super mobile, and they can oftentimes be very, very helpful for shutting down incursions of enemy forces all over the place. And of course, they can also run by oftentimes where you might expect enemy units. You can position them in such a way that they can catch the enemy units on a decent angle and eventually trade yourself positively. I had this ball of ticks and I was looking for a way to do these. I wanted to try and figure out a way to make T1 and T2 units work together seamlessly. The way that I was trying to do that was by making hit squads of T1 units like ticks and pawns, and then using those however I could to try and snipe key opponents, right? One of those was Mechanomics over here, and you can see that I was bundling the ticks up. I remember I was thinking, okay, if Mechanomics steps too far forward, I can use these ticks to jump on top of this commander. I didn't realize how strong this army was, though. I thought this was mostly shell shockers. It looks like there's a lot of medium tanks, though, and so now you can see, as I detect actually exactly how thick that army is, I decide to back the ticks off instead. You can see I encounter those medium tanks and the laser towers and all that sort of stuff, and I realize, maybe this isn't exactly the engagement that I'm hoping for here, and move those ticks back into a more spread out pattern here. Croc's continuing the aggression here, which is quite nice. Fiend trying to do their best. Oh, nice little self-D micro right there. Oh, almost got another one. Self-D micro is so wonderful on those fiends because they really can do a lot of damage. Are we microing back the injured ones here? Oh, that's really nice too. Microing back the injured fiends here. You can tell that Torben really cares about his fiends. That's really impressive right there. Oftentimes that is extremely difficult to do. That is impressive that he managed to pull that off. Microing back the injured fiend right there to make sure that they get repaired and they can go back out to the front line. Very nicely done. You can see them being patched up again. For an assault unit, that's incredibly powerful, but this is quite nice. Fiends are pushing in here, but there are counter fiends coming out of my teammate Crocs here, doing an excellent job of countering the fiends with the fiends. Fiends evaporate themselves more than anything else. And so, indeed, when they're all bunched up like that in a big cluster, you can see that we actually managed to take a positive trade somewhat out of this, just because of the fact that, yeah, those fiends, they detonate when they die, and so that means they were very explosively reactive with each other. I also set up a whole bunch of beamer turrets over here, in case you needed another example of why the beamer turret is so good. It can even hold off against these fiends. Not indefinitely, but it can certainly pack a punch. And you can see these two constructors that built those metal extractors in the early game. I'm just queuing up a whole bunch of these beamer turrets now all over the place, just as a means of sort of reinforcing this side so that we can focus a little more on aggression and a little less on defense. Torben actually resurrected this commander. Interesting. Didn't expect that. You do see a big clash of armies over here. Medium tanks and pounders and wolverines, all of the above here for the Cortex player. We're even including a couple of lashers for their vision radius. I do like that quite a bit. You can see I called Shuriken would win this, and indeed I think that was the right move. There was no missile trucks over here, so Shuriken diving on top of this could certainly have shut down a whole lot of it. Yeah, there's no anti-air over here. I wasn't sure, I'll be honest. I made that judgment based on what I could see, and I could only see about the front half of this army. But yeah, it looks like this is extremely prone to Shuriken right now, as there's essentially no anti-air. There's some SAM turrets over in the base over here, but those didn't actually reach the army, and I think a couple of Shurikens would be able to actually jump on top of this really nicely, giving for a really fabulous trade over on that side. Now my Sprinter are out, and you can see those are actually decent enough at dealing with these, at least in conjunction with the pawns they are. It's not a perfectly efficient trade, but it's an efficient enough trade that you can stay in the game as long as you have resbots, and you can see that I have more than enough resbots coming out here. I like this teetering back and forth that my pink player over here, Sinyard, is doing an excellent job of keeping the pressure high. I wonder what we're doing over here. It looks like Mr. D is just kind of streaming out grunts right now. Building up the build power, I suppose, is not the end of the world. T2 Constructor was also handed out here, but for right now, Mechanomics is essentially holding the line. This is nice. Zaro finally pushing in with a whole bunch of fiends to break the enemy lines. Those fiends are going to push on through, getting deep into the enemy backline, and they're going to push as far as they can. Very nicely done. At this point, I distinctly remember feeling out-teched. Like, I know I'm on T2 at the same stage as everyone else, but it definitely felt like I was way behind. So I think probably part of this should include teching up as quickly as possible here to make sure that there's not really any, like, I like the late T1 or the late T2 transition in the sense that it allowed me to really contribute on the front lines, but I think as soon as my contributions started to not really get anywhere, I should have T2'd a little bit sooner here. Front line for Mr. D is going to go down. Wind turbines are going to get flamed apart here as those hot spewed material fly out of the Fiend right now and destroy the base of the Lavender player here for the blue team. Mechanomics also forced to retreat off, and at this point finally has a T2 lab. I wonder if we haven't stayed on T1 a little too long over here on this left-hand side. Right-hand side is befallen upon by a whole bunch of Shuriken, making for an extremely efficient trade for all of these fiends from Crocs. Very nicely done. That was my signal as well to move my meager force forward, although there wasn't really that much that I could do. Anti-air was included over here. We do have a couple of, rather, it's actually just a single chainsaw. I saw so many anti-air missiles flying out. I thought it was multiple anti-air forces, rather. Turns out it was just the one chainsaw. But this line is broken, and that is really important here. Now, Fiends are going to do great to clean up a lot of these medium tanks. They're excellent at mopping those up, especially when they group up like this. However, you do need enough of them. There's always the numbers component, right? Enough of anything will kill anything. Janus is also taking a great trade against those pink forces that are all down, but there is a ton of pink res bots, and they are going to eat up 5.3 thousand metal worth of juicy reclamation. And that is going to be well worth it. At this point, I realize I am severely lacking in the energy sector, and so start up a fusion reactor, and then I also start up a Prude back here. Wasn't sure what their bombing capabilities might be, but now you can see our yellow player has been building up a significant bombing force of these Hailstorms, the Cortex Heavy Strategic Bomber, and he's got quite a lot of them. Going to be carpet bombing the entire green base here. And there is no longer a green base. After that much bombing, there's basically nothing standing. The bombers are going to target down this little build power facility. That's very nicely done. I was pinging it to make sure he noticed. And they're also going to get the advanced geothermal. That's exactly why I built the Prude right there. And at this point, the left-hand side has collapsed almost entirely. The right-hand side is held quite nicely here. You can see that Mauser are finally out, and I very luckily was able to move my forces in here, but there was also shurikens to support in case that didn't work out. That was very risky. If these shuriken had been a little too late and my forces had been delayed a little bit, the Mauser here would have been too far forward and they would have died, but luckily wasn't the case. Fusion reactor's bomb now on the left side of the map has completely fallen. Another player taps out on the blue forces side. At this point, Torben has decided to just spam out T1 units. This is a really easy trap to fall into. You start spamming out T1 units, and it's good in the sense that it lets you break lines, but also it's very expensive, right? You're essentially expensing every second, and you don't really leave yourself open much expenditure to go for basically anything else. These sumos, rather, are much nicer, and in conjunction with the T1 spam, they can work quite nicely. This is a good move by Torben, bundling up the T1 units and making sure they're all in a big group before moving out. That's going to allow you to hit the enemy lines a little bit harder if they're not torn apart by a ton of Mauser firing away right now. Very nicely done. Shuriken jumping on top of all these sumos over here, and the Fiends are going to jump in on top of the sumo. Very nicely done, as this left-hand side is crumbling quickly. Resbots over here doing what they can. I had a lone Resbot here as well, trying to eat up some of the spoils of war. Another thing in the background here is I queued up a resurrected constructor to gather these metal extractors. Easy to forget to do that, but it is really important that you collect those metal extractors from your enemy whenever possible. Bombers will take down the geothermal up here. There's a flak turret up, though. Or was it a flak truck? I saw flak coming out of something. Maybe I am mistaken. Or it was bombed. Oh no, there was a flak truck. There it is. Yeah, flak truck, great for shutting down those T2 bombers, obviously. Commander moved forward here to try and deal with these Mauser. I had to pull my forces in order to shut that down. And it was actually an effective commander trade because it did take out essentially all of the assault forces. Now we have some lightning tanks coming out, and those are much better for shutting down this T1, but the sumo have already waddled within range. Very dangerous, those sumo. The Mauser, of course, are not effective when they're retreating here, so the lightning tanks are going to be all there is to clean all this up. I decided to start up a sharpshooter transition here, but I think that was the wrong move. I think welders probably would have been the right maneuver. Aurorax using his commander to block this here. Oh, nice pullback with those Fiends. Very nice micro right there. Pulling the Fiends back so that they don't all die in the explosion. That's so easy to lose all your Fiends to that. Moves the Fiends in here to push the purple base. With the commander down, that's basically the last line of defense. And I think this heavy laser tower is going to be falling shortly as well. The Fiends collapse on top of everything here, and that is the purple base going down into smoke and cinders as well. The T1 spam accompanied by the sumos here is quite nice. However, T2 bombers are now coming in for the advanced geothermal. Oh, and this hurts, right? Again, why those Prudes are so wonderful, especially if you're going to build production by one of these things. See, it takes out a huge segment of the build power here for the blue players' T1 spam, and with the Fiends running in on the right-hand side, this is a surefire victory here for the beloved red team. Dark Dignity, I almost said Dark Diggity, decides to queue up a vote, and indeed the blue team will decide to tap out here. Overall, I think probably the best thing that I could have improved is getting on my T2 transition a lot quicker, using my teammates' success to leverage myself into a better economy. I think that's probably the right decision to make in this situation here. Excellent bombing runs from our yellow player, excellent pressure applied by Crocs over here on the right-hand side, and an excellent job with, I guess, crisis management over here by Sinyard over on the left-hand side, and eventually breaking 2 versus 1 opponents over there. Very cool to see. Hope this is somewhat informative, and I hope you enjoyed. I like to do these little reviews, these self-critiques every once in a while. I'm, of course, open to critiquing your own matches as well, in case you'd like to join the Discord and submit them at the Replays channel there. The link for that will be down below in the Discord description, the Discord part of the description. Other than that, though, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I will see you in the very next Beyond Arisen video. Peace out, folks.